Hello, hello. Today we have our magic cards for some key players in week 14. Really digging in deep outside of that little number next to their name in your apps, actually looking at the context, breaking everything down, and giving it a grade to try and help out with some of those start and sits. Like we got the Chargers running backs here against Philly, for example. Looking at the Eagles run D against running backs adjusted to their schedule, how much they've given in terms of that fantasy production, the receiving running back game adjusted to the schedule, the advantage in the trenches, how many explosive carries they give up, the opponent pace of play, meaning the Eagles' offense. They run a really slow offense, which doesn't really help the Chargers' offense on the other side, less plays, that sort of thing. And total spread, are they home, that sort of stuff. So we're looking at Hampton here in a potential return spot. The worry is that he comes in and it's more of a 50-50 split in an offense that isn't the greatest right now. They are 18th in scoring offense in the year. So even though they have a ton of firepower, a great quarterback, the offense isn't scoring too much, partially because the offensive line isn't that good. The big positive here is one, the Bears torched the Eagles last week on the ground specifically, but two, Jalen Carter is not going to play. The two times that's happened this year, week one, Javonte Williams, 20 points in that opener, and then Scadaboo of the Giants had 30 points against the Eagles when Jalen Carter didn't play. The other worry is just the lack of receiving here. Herbert in this offense, they are throwing less, but specifically in like the last 5 games, Vidal is averaging like 1 target a game. So Hampton, when he did have like those 3 straight great games, a lot of it was through the air, actually. 7 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets. So a little bit less there. So it makes me worried if it's a 50-50 split. Hopefully, if he comes back, it's more like we saw from Bucky Irving last week. But if Hampton misses this, I'm fine playing Vidal here. Next one up, we are going to stick with running backs. Jaylen Warren versus the Baltimore Ravens. And you can even plug in Kenneth Walker in here. It'll be the same in terms of that matchup. The big thing here is since week 6, when Warren came back from injury, it has been like that true 50-50 split. Warren is getting the goal line work. Gainwell is getting the majority of the receiving. It's a little better matchup for Gainwell, technically, just because he's that main pass catcher. But Baltimore in general on the ground has been amazing in the second half of the year. They were one of the worst, and then in the second half of the year, they are the best in terms of EPA per rush. In terms of fantasy points, specifically in the last 5 games, they've been 6th best. So still, they have made all the way up to 13th after being basically like bottom 3 to start the year. So in this offense, when they're on the road, they're underdogs, that team total, like they're not projected to score 20 points even, it does make me scared for Jaylen Warren this week. He's very touchdown dependent in this matchup, I'll say. Breece Hall, I like how this sets up for him, although Miami is very similar to Baltimore. The only team to improve more than Miami is Baltimore in terms of that run D. Dolphins, again, one of the worst to start of the year. Lately, they've been great. Top 5 against the run in terms of EPA per play. So that is not good for Breece Hall. The positive here is more so that game script. They're 3-point underdogs and they're at home. That's rare for the Jets these days. So in terms of his volume, it's been amazing recently. He got every single running back touch that the Jets had last week. So Isaiah Davis didn't get anything. So the volume should be there, especially in this matchup. And I love the talent, obviously. So the defense is getting better. Still have allowed a decent amount of explosive plays. But Breece Hall, I would say it's more of a positive matchup than a negative one this week. DeAndre Swift and Monangai, another duo here, the third one, really, of this duo. One key point is Green Bay is going to be without Devontae Wyatt, their defensive tackle. And the other thing is, very similar to the Chargers, the Bears just haven't had much receiving as of late. If you remember, like Swift, I think his first game back, he had 8 targets and it went like 5 for 30. But that's in fantasy PPR league. That's 8 points. That's great. Monangai and Swift have averaged 2 points per game in receiving over the last month since that combined. 2 points. So it's not too much. Last year when Swift played the Packers, he had a touchdown in each game, but it was very similar. No receiving. So I think that's more so what you're relying on, even though the Packers obviously have a good run defense overall. They are road dogs. That's the worry there. I don't think there's a huge ceiling here. If you're playing 2 guys that are more similar, you're deciding between 2 guys that are more similar, and you think another player has more upside than Swift or Monangai here, I would lean more toward that way just because it is a true 50-50 split. They're not getting much receiving, and it's not the greatest matchup in my opinion. And the last running back, we're going to go Quinshon Judkins here. A positive one. Against the Titans, really good spot here for Quinshon Judkins. Very similar to Breece Hall when we're looking at the Browns. they've had a lot of games this year where they have played teams that are also pretty bad. And in those games, Quinshon Judkins really does really well. And the ones that they've won in particular. So I would say just whenever they're close or they win, that's when the positive things from Judkins comes, just because he gets that really high rushing volume and that efficiency is there. But he's been the RB4, RB11, and the RB10 in the 3 games that the Browns have won this year. So they're home favorites right now against the Titans defense. That they have Simmons back on the defensive line. I would say it's a little better than 29th, but still, not good. And it gives Judkins more opportunities here. So I still like him. Should get that volume this week. Moving to receivers, this is an interesting one. Khalil Shakir versus the Bengals, who have been a lot better than people would expect against receivers. An insane stat. They are number 1 against receivers adjusted to that schedule in the last 5 games. However, against slot receivers, which is where Shakir lines up 70% of the time, that's where they're not as good. Very similar to like you think how bad they are against tight ends. Is Shakir like the closest thing to a tight end if Kincaid misses this game? Potentially. I think Shakir is the type of receiver to do well against Cincinnati. Very similar to like a DJ Moore when he was that yards after catch guy, had his good game against the Bengals earlier this year. Shakir, all of his production, all of it comes from yards after catch. Every single year, even though he hasn't been like that top fantasy guy, he's top 5 in yards after catch per reception and all that sort of stuff, the missed tackle stats, that sort of thing. So in this spot where he's not really going to have too much of DJ Turner, the primary defensive back on him, that nickel guy, it's going to be Jalen Davis off of the practice squad. Has done well over the past couple games, hasn't really been picked on or anything, but like he's a 29-year-old corner that has 1 start in his entire career. So it would lead to me to believe like he's on the Bengals practice squad. They weren't having too many guys that were doing too much anyways. So it would still be a good matchup, in my opinion, for Khalil Shakir there. They've allowed a lot of those explosive plays. That offense on the other side obviously helps because the Bills have a real good defense, but the Bengals offense should help them in terms of the game script. They play super fast. The Bills are projected to score 30 points. So especially if Kincaid misses, I don't mind the ceiling potential of Shakir here, even though last week obviously was pretty awful. This next one, we're going to go to Troy Franklin. An interesting one. I feel like on Twitter, I'm going to post these, and people are going to see like, oh, Las Vegas is 24th against receivers. They're 24th against receivers on the outside. Why is he a C? Because if you look a little bit deeper, main thing is Las Vegas, they run the most zone coverage in the NFL, and Troy Franklin is probably one of the most man coverage dependent players in the entire league. He is 4th in targets per route against man coverage this year. Incredible. You think like the other guys up there are like superstar players, and it's Troy Franklin. Against zone defense, which he's going to play 90% of the time, 40th in targets per route. And this is coming off a game where he had 3 targets and Pat Bryant ran more routes than him, had 7 targets, and Pat Bryant is better against zone coverage than he is against man, which is kind of more rare for receivers. So not to say that you would start Pat Bryant, but there's just lots of things going against him here because also like they're over touchdown favorites. The Raiders defense, in general, their passing secondary isn't good, but it's not the worst. Eric Stokes is going to get him 50% of the time, and he's been great. So it really just depends on how many opportunities he gets on the other side of the field against Kelly, who's been the opposite, been really bad. But I just see it as being one of those games, like maybe he hits a big home run, that sort of thing, but that hasn't really been consistent for him. I don't love the volume potential here, so it scares me to play a guy like Troy Franklin. Nico Collins is up next. He's going to get a lot of Trent McDuffie. 8th against receivers this year. They're 10th against those outside guys. McDuffie, still been great this season. Nico Collins has been amazing when he's healthy. It depends what you count as healthy. Like, he didn't have a target in the second half when he had that chest injury. I kind of count that as like an injury game. If you take that out, the other 5 games, his last 5, 10 plus targets in every single one. So the volume has been consistent. He's been a wide receiver 1 consistently. So he has been very good as of late. Tough matchup here, but would start him in most leagues. It's one of those where if you have really good receivers, you have 3 stud or 4 stud receivers, or maybe a stud running back in the flex, and you're only starting 2 receivers, and you're deciding between Nico Collins and maybe another top 12 guy, that's when I would maybe get away from Nico Collins just because of the matchup in this spot. Christian Watson, another interesting one where, yes, the Bears are 26 against receivers. Does that mean they're bad? Not necessarily. They've been more middle of the road as of late, and Jalen Johnson is back, and that is the key part here. Tyreek Stevenson, not a bad matchup at all. Jalen Johnson, really bad matchup. He'll get him about 50% of the time. Johnson allowed an 11% target share last season. 11%. That is the lowest in the entire NFL. He is an elite corner, in my opinion, so it makes this matchup just okay. He only needs one big play, so that's going to be the deciding factor, and he's been the clear wide receiver one on this team as of late, but Johnson definitely makes this matchup a little tougher. Isn't expected to shadow, but like I said, about 50%. Jacoby Meyers at receiver. The floor is low and the ceiling is high, which is the opposite of what we usually get with Jacoby Meyers. In his 3 full games as a Jaguar, his targets 6, 6, and then another game, same exact 6. 11 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. Touchdowns in each of the last 2, and then the other game was like 6 catches or 5 catches for 60 yards, something like that, where you're getting double-digit fantasy points every single time. But there's also some risk there, like obviously Jacksonville's receivers haven't been very consistent this year. Overall, I would say it's still a pretty low floor for Meyers. Good spot here in general. Sauce Gardner obviously going to miss this game. That makes it a lot better. The Colts offense hasn't been as good. That's partially wise because so many teams have to throw so much against the Colts. But if they're in their spot here where maybe it's a really close game, Jacksonville's running as much as they usually do, then I don't fully trust Meyers in this matchup. I think with Washington is out, Parker Washington, I would be much more comfortable playing Meyers. If Washington is in, like I feel like one of the receivers is going to do well, and you're really just blindfold throwing a dart. And one tight end here, Oronde Gadsden. Oronde Gadsden? I don't know. Versus the Eagles, it's pretty bad. Pretty bad. The main thing here, as I was talking about earlier, the last month, the Chargers have been passing extremely minimally. 20 attempts last week. You wouldn't expect that from a Justin Herbert offense like we saw at the start of the year. This Eagles defense has been incredible against in the red zone, incredible against tight ends in general. He's running a little fewer routes now because of the pass protection and everything. They have that other tight end that is more their blocking guy, and then Gadsden as their receiving tight end. So he only ran about like 68% of the routes last week, a little bit lower than his usual. So with him having such a bad floor recently, there's better options this week than I would say. Over the past month, if I had Geno Smith and you had Lamar Jackson, we were playing each other in fantasy, I would be better off, which is not good. Lamar, it's been horrible. He has a great matchup. However, recently, Pittsburgh's been more so middle of the road. And if we look at the career against the Steelers, Lamar averaging under 15 fantasy points per game. So on paper, I would still say, A- grade. He's set up very well. It's not an auto start. Like if you have 2 quarterbacks that are really good, you drafted a really good quarterback late, like you have a Dak Prescott or a Drake May or something like that, that gives you 2 quarterbacks. Maybe you have a really good one when Lamar was injured. I don't mind going away from him just because how bad he's been as of late, but set up better than normal, but he was last week too. Next one is Baker Mayfield. Has not been good as of late. Again, injury, I think, is a big part of it. But the Saints defense has gotten a lot better, and that run defense has gotten a lot worse. So for a quarterback, it's not really what you want. They are 8.5-point favorites at home. Don't love the volume here. He hasn't been very accurate. He's only had 20 fantasy points in one game since week 6. Makes me worried for Baker Mayfield as well if you're thinking of starting him. And then Jacoby Brissett, this last one, top 5 quarterback since he's been starting. Volume, basically better than anybody. C- grade because he is set up so well in terms of that happening again in the volume. Home, 8.5-point dogs against the Rams defense is really good, but he should have another game of like 45 plus passing attempts. He's had 40 attempts in 4 straight games. He's had 300 passing yards in 3 straight games. So I still think he is playable in fantasy, even though the Rams defense overall, really good. Thank you guys for watching, though. If you have any other questions on matchups in general, you want to know about a specific player, leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer all you guys. Have fun. See you soon.